Alright guys, so I'm doing another video today. Needle and Anchor have released a pocket tutorial. So we've got 4 different pocket styles here that I'm going to go through with you today. I've done just weird different colors out of my scrap basket, mainly so you can see what's going on in the video. I've also got a yellow thread. I'm just trying to be really random so that you can see. So this strappy one is going to replicate in all of them the pocket of the bag. So this is, we pretend that this is like the proper size of whatever bag you're making, and then I will show you how to do the different type of pockets. So this first one here is going to be called a faux trim pocket. So what I've done is I've taken a 2-inch strip of fabric, and then I ironed it in half, and then I steamed it that way, and then I took both these edges and turned them into the center and pressed it again. So now we've got this nice edging that has no raw edges anyway, except on the edge. So this is our pocket, and then I have cut a piece of fabric that is the same width as the pocket panel. And I've just done it in a different color. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a faux trim to the top of this and then make a slip pocket. So all we do is we open it up in half so that we can see the raw edges. And we're just going to place the edge of the pocket right up against that fold and then slot it under. So for this, you probably want to do something more decorative. So you might want to make your stitch length a little bit longer. So we're going to back stitch at the start, and then I'm just going to slot the fabric in and stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the blue trim. Now I've actually made my trim a little bit longer, but that's okay. And then when I get to the end of the pink fabric, I'm going to do a back stitch and then pull it out and trim the tails. So in this particular instance, you would then just chop off this excess and then trim off those tails. I'll bring my bin closer. Okay, so now I've got this nice stitching that's 1/8 of an inch from the edge. It's nice and long and decorative to make it more fun, and there's no raw edges on that top. So now what we do is we take our bag piece, and we're just going to lay it so that the 3 raw edges are lined up against the edges of the bag. And then we can just baste it down. So basting is just like tacking it in place. Oh, and I forgot to turn that off. Hold on. Sorry about that. Forgot to put my phone on silent. All right, so we're just going to tack down the sides and along the bottom to hold it in place. And I'm doing this at a 1/8 of an inch stitch length. Width, sorry. And I'm not really too fussed about what stitch length I'm using. I'm just keeping it on the long one. But if you want to, you can change it to the shorter, more normal stitch length. And then we're going to swivel and go up the edge. And then when we get to the top of the blue accent, we're just going to do a back stitch so it's all held in place. Then what I like to do is from the bottom, I'm going to pick where I want to separate this pocket. Because if I just leave it as one big pocket, it's going to gape like that in the bag and it's not going to look nice. So I personally tend to do 2/3 and 1/3 so that I've got 2 different size pockets. Or you could put it in the middle. That's your personal choice. So I'm going to go back to a more joining stitch length because I want this to be sturdy. And I'm going to do a couple of stitches forward and then back stitch. And then I'm going to work my way up. And then when I get to the blue, I'm going to make what's like a Y shape. And this is going to make the pocket very strong at this section. And then I'm just going to pull that out and I'll come and show you. So we've got like a little Y. It's not very big, but what that does is that gives extra stability to the pocket. As you can see, I missed the side. The basting came undone. Pop that back on there. And so that is now a slip pocket. And that is quite a strong line there. So when you're doing a joining seam, you want your stitches to be smaller. And so that is now a faux trim slip pocket. Pop that one aside. Next, we're going to do just a simple slip pocket. And I think I'm doing these out of order in the tutorial. So I've just got, again, this is pretending to be my bag piece. And then I've just got a piece of fabric that is longer than it is wider. So if you've got a print, you're going to want to have the print going, so this is the top and this is the bottom. And then I've just, to make my life a bit easier, I have ironed it in half. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch down the side, and we're going to stitch along the top as well, but we're going to leave about that much of a gap in between. So I'm going to start from the fold, and I'm going to back stitch at the start to lock the stitches. And then I'm going to pivot, go along this top edge and back stitch. And then pull this out, trim off those tails. If you trim your tails as you go, life becomes a lot easier. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to flip it over so that I can start from the fold again. And come up, needle down, pivot, and come across. Now, keeping in mind that the bigger the gap you leave, the easier it is to turn, but the harder it will be to get that to sit straight. So before I turn it through, I'm going to just take some scissors and drop them. And then I'm just going to trim on an angle all of the corners. So what I don't want is a 45-degree cut along there. You actually want to make it slightly deeper, and you'll find that your points become pointier. So you want to cut in on more of an angle in both directions. So if you can see that, that's deeper than 90 degrees, sorry, not 45. So now we're going to open up the gap, and I'm just going to take a corner with my finger, pinch it like this, and bring it through. Push the rest of the fabric through. And then I'm going to scratch my fingernail along that seam. And that may seem like a weird thing to do, but what it's going to do is it's going to push the seam out to be prominent so that there's no rippling. And as you can see, even though I've tried, this corner is still not completely out. So I'm going to take my stiletto and I'm just going to pop it in the corner and gently kind of ease out the corner. I don't want to pull too hard, and I don't want to put this in too far, or I might wreck the stitches, or I might pull out the raw edge, both of which would be bad. So I'm just going to gently ease out those corners like that. Okay, so I've actually set up my iron today, so I'm now just going to give that a good press on the 3 sides that are closed. And then when we get to this top edge, the easiest way for me is I stick my fingers into the hole and push against the seam. And 9 out of 10 times that will fold under those raw edges, and then I can just pinch it. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to iron that seam so it's nice and flat as well. I'm just going to do that off camera because my camera isn't wide enough to get everything in the shot. So I've got a little stray hair or fiber. So I'm just going to chop that off like that. So now I can take my pocket, and before I sit it on there, what I want to do is I want to seal that top edge. You could also make it the bottom edge if you prefer. If you had a print and you like one side more than the other, that's something you can think about. So I'm just going to top stitch. So I'm going to do a couple of stitches forward and then back to lock it in. And I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch from this top edge. And then back stitching. Trim off those tails. And so now I can place my pocket. Now I've still got this bottom open. I just want to let you know that, but that's okay. So I'm going to place the pocket, and you usually want to place it in about the center. So I'm going to place it there. Now, if you're new to bag making, you may also want to take some pins and just pin it in place. So a little tip with pins, only put them in about halfway. Have the ball facing outwards and always never push them all the way in like this. This is a big mistake that people make. What happens is this ball hits your sewing machine and can quite often cause issues. So you just want to have it about halfway in if you're going to put pins in. So now I'm just going to stitch down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side. And I'm going to do that at 1/8 of an inch away from the pink edge. I'm going to take my pin out because I don't need it there. And I'm always going to stop with the needle in the down. Nope, I'm not. I just ran out of bobbin thread. That's okay. We'll just grab another color for the purposes of this. I'm going to grab silver because it's nice and full. And we still have a couple more pockets to go. Normally, if this was like a bag that I was making to sell, I would change the bobbin back to the same thread that I needed. But for the purposes of this, we'll be fine. Now, because I've got to stop and start, I'm going to go 2 stitches back from where I run out of bobbin thread, and I'm going to start from there. So I'm going to stitch 2 and then back 2 to lock them in. And then I'm going to stop with the needle in the down position. Sometimes you have to manually crank it. And then I can pivot this. So I'm going to go down again. And needle in the down position and pivot. And then up the other side. Now you could stop there, and that is a fine slip pocket. But if you're anything like me, you're quite rough on your bags. So what I like to do is I will pivot it back this way, and I will do 1 stitch over. Sometimes you need 2 depending on your stitch length. And then I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the stitching I just did, which will make it 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So I'm going to stitch down again. And I'm going to stop 1/8 of an inch from the bottom and then pivot. And what this is doing, especially on bigger pockets, it's going to almost double its strength so that it's less likely to tear away. And then we're going to back stitch. So now we've got this nice looking double stitching that's also made the pocket insanely strong, especially at this top edge where things can get pulled. So if you wanted to as well, because of the slip pocket, because this is just a little one, I would be inclined to just do a pen pocket. So I'm going to start from the bottom in the stitches on the bottom row, and I'm going to do a couple of stitches and back stitch, and then just shoot up the side and then back stitch at the top. And I now have a nice little pen pocket, as well as a pocket that's big enough for a cell phone or a mobile phone, whatever you want to call it. So then we've got a bigger pocket and then a little pen pocket. So that's another way to do one. That's just a simple slip. So you can make these any size, as long as they're, you know, you don't want them in the seam allowance if you build them this way. Next up, we are going to do the zipper pocket. So again, this is my base. These are my pocket pieces. So I've got 2 of these. I've got a zipper. And this is going to be my facing. So the zipper facing is what we're going to sew to here. And then we'll sew the zipper pocket to the facing piece. So I'm going to take a pen and a ruler. And I'm just going to rule a box in the center. Now, depending on the size of your facing will be dependent on the size of your zipper. I'm just going to do 5 inches for today. So you want to make sure that you don't go all the way to the edge. And then I'm going to go down 3/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to rule the sides to make it a closed box. Now the lines that I've just put on here, are actually going to be my stitch line. So I'm going to stitch that. You can see I haven't put it perfectly in the center. You actually don't need this much extra fabric. So I could quite happily, if I want to keep the weight of the bag down, I could trim off this excess like this. And then a little bit off this side. So that's probably a better size facing. The pattern does come with actual size pieces, but I'm just showing you in a scenario. So we're going to take our main bag piece and I'm going to place this where I want the zipper to end up. So I'm going to put it there. So now we're just going to stitch with a normal stitch length. So normal for me is about 2.5. We're going to stitch forward and back. And then needle down in that very corner. Stitch along the edge. Now, my pocket's not perfectly even, but this is more about how to do the pockets than where to place them, because these also aren't real bags. Although I could make them into bags. And you can use, depending on how many sides your bag has, you could do 2 combos of these pockets in one bag. So you could have one wall that's got this and then another wall that's got the slip pocket if you wanted to. Or you could do the slip pocket under this and have a zipper pocket above. You can do many combinations and variances. So I've just folded that in half to make a small nick so that when I open it up, I can get my scissors into the center of the zipper part. So when I get about 1/2 inch from the end, I'm going to instead draw like a Y and triangle out the corners. So I'll do it to both sides and then I'll show you what I mean. So we've now got little triangles in the corner, which is why I call it triangling out the corners. So we're going to take all of this pink of the facing and we're just going to push it into the back of the pocket panel piece. So the fake bag. So I'm going to pull it around like that. And then I'm just going to use my iron to press that edge nice and crisp. So I've got my little ironing table and my mini iron here. It's just run out of water, but it will still do the job. So I'm just ironing all 4 of those edges to be nice and flat. So you want your pocket panel to be as flat as you can. So as you can see, I really need a little bit of steam on this, but I'm going to try and press it from the back to make it a little bit more flat. But a shot of steam goes a long, long way with an iron, I promise. And you may also have this problem. So when you first turn it, it may not want to sit perfectly flat. So what you want to do is you want to grab each corner and pull it out. You can even, if you do this little kind of circle motion, it'll make it sit flatter already. And then I'm just going to iron that again. So if you've got those kind of issues, don't think you did it wrong. It just needs some further fabric manipulation, I guess. Okay, so now I've got my facing there. I'm going to pop that aside for a second. And I'm going to grab my zipper and my 2 pocket pieces. Now, normally this would be the same size as your facing, but I just trimmed mine down, so it's a little bit of a different size. And then you want your zipper to be the width of your pocket piece. So in this particular instance, I need to chop a little bit off, but this was just a random leftover piece in my box. Okay. So I'm going to have the pocket piece right sides up, and then I'm going to also place the zipper right sides up, and then right on the edge, I'm going to stitch those 2 together. I'm going to back stitch at the start, and then stitch along the edge and back stitch at the end. Like so. Then I'm going to do the same to the other side of the zipper. So right side's facing up. I should have used the print, sorry about that. And then zipper facing up, and then we're going to stitch it. So I'm going to back stitch at the start because back stitching is a very good habit to have. There we go. Then we're going to open that out flat, and I'm just going to press that as well. I'm going to press it from behind to make sure that the pockets are sitting out nicely, so it's nice and flat. Now, I personally always like my zipper pulls to close to the left, so that's how I'm going to sit it at the table, keeping in mind that this here would be the wrong side that you're looking at. I'm just going to place my panel or my bag piece over the zipper pocket like this, so that the zipper is lined up in the center, like so. Then I'm going to make sure the pocket underneath is laying out flat, and I'm going to stitch around the zipper pocket. Now, I've noticed a lot of people don't like to start in the corner like I do, so I'm going to try and do it their way, where they start along the long edge about 1/3 of the way in or halfway in. So because I'm stitching the whole way round, I don't have to back stitch if I'm confident it will all sit there while I get around. So I'm going to first off zip this all the way up so that it's out of my way as much as possible. And then I'm going to stop with the needle down and unzip it so I can get around again. Needle down and pivot. Now I'm stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from the fabric, so my blue fabric. Needle down and pivot. I'm also going to trim off this tail so it's not in my way. Needle down and pivot. And so when I get back to the start of the stitches, I want to go through 2 more and then back 1. 1, 2, back. You can't really tell from the back because it's a silver thread. But we've now got a stitch all the way around. So now if you let this go, you will find that this just sits, it's usually approximately 1 inch longer. So you want to come along with some scissors and just make them even. Like so. And then I'm just going to stitch it down the sides and across the bottom. Now you'd leave the bottom open if you're turning your bag through that pocket, but otherwise we can just stitch it completely up. So I'm going to fold back my bag piece, back stitch at the top, get to the bottom, needle down, pivot, and then I'm just going to fold it this way out of my way. Needle down, pivot, and then I'm going to fold it this way out of my way. And trim off the tails at the start. And so now you have a little zipper pocket. All right, so I left potentially the hardest one to last. It's not that it's hard, it's just it's got a few extra steps, so I thought I'd leave it till the end. So what we're going to do, I've got my bag, my facing. These are my welt pieces, so I did them in a different color so that you could see them better, and they also have a right and a wrong side, which I thought might help. And then this is the closure of the pocket. So this is a double welt pocket. You'll see these quite often in like suit jackets and things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put my 2 welt pockets together with the right sides together. And I'm going to draw a line through the center, like so. And then 1/2 inch from each edge, I'm just going to put a little mark so that I can see. So I've got this. So I've got a line all the way across and then 2 little marks here, 1/2 inch from each edge. So on a normal stitch length, I want to stitch up to that little mark that we made. And then this middle section up to the next mark, you want to put it on your longest stitch length because we're going to pull this out a little bit later. 1 more stitch, and then I'm going to go back to a joining stitch length and then back stitch to lock those ones in and run off the edge. So I'm going to show you that. So you can see I've got little stitches and then really long stitches, and then back over this side we go back to little stitches. And then I'm going to turn it the other way like this, and I'm going to iron it down. So these are now my welt pockets. So I'm going to iron that so that they sit nice and flat. Good sewing means lots of ironing. The flatter things sit, the nicer they look. Okay. So now we can pop that aside for a minute, and we're going to grab our facing piece. And just like earlier, we're going to draw a rectangle on. This time I'm going to do 5 inches by, let's do a whole inch so I can really show you these welts. I know it seems big, but just bear with me. I normally wouldn't make it this big, but I just want to show you. So we've now got our facing. So in the same manner as before, we're going to put the facing onto the bag and we're going to stitch around the line that we drew in a normal stitch length. So again, for me is 2.5. Most machines are around 2.4 to 2.6, just depending on your machine, I guess. That squeaking noise, by the way, is my knee lift. I think it needs a little bit of oil. Then we're going to back stitch when we get back to the start. And then exactly how we did before, we're going to bend it over and cut out the center. Now you normally wouldn't make your welts this big. I just really want you to be able to see them. I have never demoed these, so I just want to show you how cool they can be. So we're triangling out the corners again. And then again, I'm going to come and I'm going to iron them. And I'm going to push the pocket panels through the pocket hole. Hide that facing to the back. So I'm just turning it through and then ironing it down, making sure I don't get my fingers or iron any extra creases that we don't need, because we don't want to do that either. Okay. Last side. I'm giving it a really good iron. If you've got steam, I highly recommend using it. It will make the ironing process a bit quicker. Okay, so I've got this really big hole, but that's okay. So I'm going to take my welts and I'm just going to lay them over so that the line is in the center, like this. And this is why I did them really big, so you can see what I'm doing. Normally you would not make them this large. So now I'm going to stitch all the way around the edge of the pocket. Oops, or I'm not, because I just let my thread fall out. Now if you were doing this on a jacket, you actually stitch differently to if we're doing it into a bag, just so you know. So if you were doing a jacket with a welt pocket, what you want to do is you want to stitch right where you're not going to see the stitches, and you just do it in the sides. But this is a pocket, so we're going to just stick some nice top stitching all the way around. Needle down and pivot. One more stitch, pivot, and then back stitch there. Now I'm going to trim all my tails off so that they're out of the way. Okay, so now we want our lining panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to put right sides together and stitch it along here, making sure that we backstitch at both ends. And then from the inside, we're going to move the bag panel out of the way, and we're going to top stitch along this panel here, so along the pink, to hold that down nice and flat. So you won't really see this, but it's just keeping that seam nice and flat in the bag, like so. And then we're just going to take the bottom and bring it up to the top of the pocket, like so, and we're going to stitch it to the facing. And then while I've got my needle in there, I can just fold the bag over out of the way and stitch down the sides, making sure I backstitch. And then same with the other side of the pocket. Trim off those tails. Now, I've still got one more step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my snips and I'm just going to snip my basting threads that I did. You can also just snip one and then get your stiletto and pull the other threads out like this and just undo it. Hello, Poppy. He's about to start talking to me in a minute. So we can just, what we're doing is we're opening up the welt pocket so we can actually get inside. So when you buy a jacket, they quite often just leave this stitching in and it's your problem to undo it. Hey, Poppy. Do you go outside? Yes, okay, in a second. And so then, you've got a welt pocket. You'll need to iron it again after you do that. That now has a different colour inside. So I hope this was a helpful little video. Don't forget to trim off your tails too. And until next time, guys, happy sewing. Bye!